This is the moment in time where buyers have been waiting probably 20 years to have this kind of leverage. It is very difficult to actually build a product for less than $900 to $1,000 per square foot. Now we're in this market where there's 17 taxes. If you combine federal and provincial taxes, there's 17 of them.
Are we in a housing crisis?
Right? I don't think we're addressing the real problem. And the real problem is
Ladies and gentlemen, episode 317. Today we have a very esteemed special guest, second guest of all time. Jesus, it's getting interesting around here. Today I have Mathew Lee. Mathew's managing partner of Macdonald Platinum Marketing Group. They are at the helm of some of the smallest to largest projects you're going to see around town. They are a presale marketing company, among other things. They get their hands involved at all levels, which we'll get into shortly. Matthew's going to give us some insight today on the realities of the presale real estate market and where everything's actually at. We're going to start high. We're going to funnel down low to all the nitty-gritty details. Matthew, thank you for coming in today. If you want to give us 2 cents about yourself, then we can dive right in.
Well, thank you for having me, Jay. I am one of the partners of Macdonald Platinum. It is a brokerage firm within the Macdonald Realty group of companies.
Okay.
And this is my 21st year with the company. So prior to COVID, in about 2018, we decided that we wanted to bring the multifamily marketing side back into the company from a corporate level. So we rebooted Macdonald Platinum in 2019. And then, of course, COVID hit. So it was a great time for building business.
Give you some time to think.
Gave you some time to think. And I think when the market started to move and everyone went from this office setup to a work from home, you know, as the exodus started from the urban cores, that really allowed us to kind of have some very high-level discussions with clients we otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to meet with. And then as we transitioned into 2020, things sort of snowballed, and now we are in every high-growth municipality across Metro Vancouver, and we're working on some projects on Vancouver Island now.
Okay, so you have a very well-handed idea of what's going on out there.
There's a lot going on.
There is. So I'm going to start it with the timely tale. Are we in a housing crisis? I have my very vivid opinions, but I'd love to know what you guys are seeing from where you are as obviously the creators of a lot of the inventory we've got coming down.
The short answer is no, we're not. Okay, it's a complicated process of buying land, going through an entitlement process, which allows developers to go ahead and build low-rise, mid-rise, or high-rise type product. There's a myriad of layers to the formula, most of which is the fact that it's all funded by lenders in a very large capacity. So, you know, when we look at the overall picture, if we're looking at the market from a 50,000 foot level, regardless whether we're, let's say, in Vancouver or if we're in the Fraser Valley, we're dealing with a relatively fluid situation where for sure there's a lot more inventory than there has been over the last few years. And as you and I both know, we've been saying to buyers pretty much for the last year, you know, this is the moment in time where buyers have been waiting probably 20 years to have this kind of leverage with certain types of sellers of real estate, whether it be homeowners or whether it be developers. This is the time where you can negotiate. You can have time to do due diligence, right? And it's a very sort of balanced theme. So the short answer is I think prices will likely, as we've seen, there's going to be a degree of flatlining. How long that flatline occurs or runs itself is anyone's guess. We can revisit some of that shortly in another discussion. But I think that, you know, if we're not looking at major gains in pricing, we're not really looking at pricing going right through the floor. And we're not seeing that right now, right? No. Regardless whether we're selling in North Vancouver, we're in Langley, we're in Burquitlam, we're in Richmond, we're on the west side, we're on the east side of Vancouver. You know, prices will stabilize only because generally sellers of that real estate have somewhere, or they have to go somewhere. So they can't just put their home up for sale, their condo, their townhome, anything in between, and ask a low sum of money for it, because at some point they have debt to pay off, whether it be a mortgage, or they have to take the capital proceeds and then transplant or recapitalize it into another asset.
Of course, they've got overhead to cover with mortgages outstanding and so forth, as do naturally developers in your world. So I guess that kind of blends into the current climate of the pre-sale market. Are you seeing prices come down? Just to your point, buyers have leverage in negotiating, and traditionally you could walk into a pre-sale market and have, this is the number, deal with it or walk out. Are we seeing development prices come down, and it's still that we've adjusted down and it is firm here still, or we've adjusted down but we're willing to have a conversation beyond that?
It's a very gray bag of variable factors that go into this. So land, the fixed price on land is just one very large but relatively small component in the development formula. The bigger scenario and situation that we're seeing right now is the building code, the step codes, these requirements for energy efficiency, and all of the cascade effect that these implementations have. And so, give you a case in point, if you were a developer and I was to actually just give you the land, regardless where the development is situated, let's just say we're north of the Fraser River. From a geographic perspective, it is very difficult to actually build a product for less than $900 to $1,000 per square foot by the time you clear all those fees. So bear in mind, I'm giving you the land for free, and yet by the time you go through your entitlement process, you pay your community amenity contribution costs or variation thereof, known as CACs. You have your development cost levies, which vary across Metro Vancouver. So those are their DCLs. You've got your soft costs, which would be things like permitting, you've got lending fees built into that, you've got marketing fees built into that, disposition fees on the program. It would be very difficult to deliver any kind of product for less than $900 to $1,000 a foot, right? So when you add in the land component into that, this is why it's pretty hard to buy anything north of the Fraser River for less than $900 a foot by the time you figure things out.
So just interject, it's not a developers are just trying to build high-end to make more money equation by any stretch.
So the general public, like the consensus, it just seems like the public consensus of developers out there is that they are greedy and they hike pricing and they're non-honest and everything else. The reality is, with the way that the municipal planning programs work, developers are trying to achieve a return on cost, an average return on cost of 15 to maybe 18% return on cost. So hold on, just think about let that marinate for a second, right? Because from an investment standpoint, with the amount of risk that they have to take in an effort to just achieve a 15% return annualized over 5 years, that's not a very high return for the amount of risk that they take, right?
And when we didn't say this before, but when we worked together back in 2007.
When you reported to me.
You would call
as
it
your
that.
Superior? Yeah. I remember that time fondly.
That 15% was the same back then.
Back then, the numbers were probably higher. They were probably somewhere between 18 and maybe 25%.
Really? Mm-hmm. Okay, then I'm remembering wrong.
But no, it's not so much that. It's just that you have to remember that land was significantly cheaper. Like when we were working together 2007, right? So the better part of 15 to 20 years ago, land was significantly cheaper. Development costs were significantly cheaper. We didn't have things like CACs and that. Those were added in and around the time where Vancouver hosted the Olympics. That sort of cash influx, that whole framework was really the director of planning at the time, Brent Toderin. That was sort of his champion. And so all these fees and all these cost levies and everything else, these were ways that municipalities were able to sell density.
Which we'll get into in a little bit, because personally I think that stems from the biggest problem of the whole thing, which is on the municipal side, and I guess you would know better how much the provincial side lays into that as well, but we want density, from the city, and then they're the ones implementing. You would know better. I've heard as high as 30% of costs, roughly speaking, on a purchase is taxes and red tape and fees, which is obviously the quiet side of those conversations. And then again, to your point, developers get a bad rap all the way along, which we definitely see, which is without them, the city isn't throwing towers up yet, at least. The developers are needed to build the mass amounts of things. When we maybe were in a housing crisis, I think we're in a financing crisis. But when we were, they were the ones obviously adding at bulk. It's not the mom and pops building the duplexes, which you see a lot of, but it's when these towers go up with hundreds of homes. That,
like the short equation to this is that right now there's about a 3-year supply of standing inventory currently in the market across Metro Vancouver. Built, occupancy ready, you can move in tomorrow. And so part of Platinum's positioning now is we've pivoted in the last year where we're launching very few projects a year, as are most other marketing firms and developers in the city and across the Lower Mainland, because there's so much inventory that's currently in the market right now, right? And so think about inventory that is completed, it's ready, it's move-in ready. The developers are still paying interest every day on that standing inventory. And so their profit is continuing to dwindle until that trims out.
And that is how much inventory?
If we're looking at a 5-month supply, like a balanced market, we have a 36-month supply of standing inventory right now. And so to follow up with that, there are nearly, let's say, 6,500 to 6,800 pre-sale units currently being offered for sale, not under construction, that are probably in some degree of, I wouldn't say distress, but they're in this danger zone of the project not going forward because they have not secured enough pre-sale contracts, which are generally 60 to 70% of any development. In some cases, it's higher than 70%, where they have not achieved enough sales to get the lender to advance construction financing, right? So to your earlier point, when a developer sets pricing, there's definitely a fluidity piece of what the market's willing to pay or where you can push or have to pull back on pricing. But know that any developer that is going to start a project and has to use a lender for financing, the lender is going to review the entire development, and they will set a blended price per square foot target and a percentage of sales target. So you couldn't just blast out 7 units out of a 10-unit development, let's just say, at a very low price per square foot, because the lender says, well, that's not reflective of market pricing. So you have these targets to hit. And if you can't hit those targets within generally a 12 to 18 month time frame of filing the disclosure statement, right? You won't get your construction financing. So you get to that point, you get to 12 or 18 months, and at that point, the developer has to write a huge check as a capital injection for equity into the project.
To hit that target.
To hit the target, right? Now, if you had to write a $10 or $20 million check, there's not a lot of guys out there that can write that check. Or you basically say, okay, I'm gonna give buyers the opportunity to take their deposits back, and we're gonna unwind all of the contracts that we've been writing for the last 12 or 18 months, right? Depending on the size of the project.
And then beyond that, which I guess, on the ground is, however much that drags is a credibility loss, is a massive, now you've got no contracts in place and you're sitting on the land and whatever else you've spent, and then it's kind of, we wait, either sell off what we've got or just wait for the market to turn. So big decisions, obviously, either way.
So I think what's going to happen is we'll see some of these 6,800 units, we're going to see them start to unwind themselves as we get through. We've already seen a few of them happen already, and it's not uncommon. So as these buyers who were once pre-sale buyers with deposits paid to developer lawyer, whatever the case may be, they will likely then transition into some of this finished inventory. So I think, to me, that's what's going to help us kind of drive through the next 3 to 4 years, because we have enough product. right?
So generally speaking in the market.
Yeah, potentially. So you're gonna see them absorb into the resale market. You're gonna see them, absorb into the finished, occupancy-ready pre-sale product that is now completed. And for the most part, we're going to see a postponement of new developments, probably for the next at least year to year and a half.
Okay, that leaves me, what direction do you think the market's going from here? But to that last point, do you feel that that will give us in 2027, 2028, again, another squeeze? Because, I mean, where the buyers coming from? I'm assuming that immigration, after it being such a hot topic, will get back to more normal levels. And we'll maybe get, I don't know, internal migration happening as well. But do you think that what's happening today will create a squeeze in the next handful of years, or it will just, I mean, this is crystal ball stuff, but balance out more?
It's anyone's guess. I think that in the last 2 to 3 years, there's been this huge push for the province to get involved in kind of unwinding the bureaucracy that has really prevented density from getting created in a lot of pockets across the Lower Mainland and Metro Vancouver. The challenge is that it's twofold. We have the province that has demanded that municipalities snap in line. And so when Ravi Kahlon, our housing minister, came out a couple years ago and sort of went on this soapbox tour through all these different areas saying, look, we're going to make municipalities snap in line here. So they've created these transit-orientated areas, or TOAs, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have these giant rings in these high-density pockets in Vancouver and across Metro Van. And now within those high-density rings, like 400 to 800 meters of a transit hub, you can build up to 20 stories plus. There's a significant density call. Inadvertently, that's now driven land pricing into the ground.
Well, because everyone got the same density exposure.
Well, think about like 10 years ago, right? If you had a neighbor that did a land assembly, it was like them cashing out a lotto ticket.
Yeah, 100%.
Because there was no way they were going to get to build a mid-rise or a high-rise tower on a residential block, right? And so there was this great race to go and assemble, right? It was the first neighbor to kind of screw out his other neighbor so that you could be part of the assembly and then leave them sort of hanging, right? But it was sort of everyone for themselves. Now, with the advent of the transit-orientated areas, these density hubs, they have now taken the lucrativeness of a land assembly completely out. And so land's not worth as much, anywhere near as much as it used to be. Because now everyone within these corridors, they can build density, right? So the way I see the evolution of our housing going over the next few years, single family homes, there's sort of just been this war on single family homes because it just caters to the 1%ers, right? The perception is that it's so unattainable for the general public that people shouldn't be allowed to have them anymore, right? So whether you agree with it or not, that's the way I see it. And we're going to see fewer and fewer single family homes get built. We already know that, right? What they're being replaced by, right? So the conversation goes, wow, Jay, you and Mika live in a single family home? That's amazing. To, wow, you and Mika, you guys live in a duplex. That's amazing, right? So like duplexes to me are going to replace single family homes. Townhomes are probably at risk. Townhomes to me are going to be extinct, and they represent probably 80% of the product type that we sell at Platinum, end user type townhome product. And why are they going to be extinct? It's because there's huge sort of call, and the sort of new flavor of the month now is the multiplex, right? Where you can build anywhere from, let's say, 3 to 6 homes on a single family lot.
Are you seeing a lot of those come to fruition? I know that there was a lot of talk behind it. Are they actually, are you guys being approached for that? Or if you're not, because you're kind of dealing with bigger stuff, are you seeing a lot of that happening?
For sure. Yeah, there's over 125 currently like underway just at the city.
Being built now, or applications in?
Applications in, there's dozens that are under construction, and we're starting to see them, right? And so the jury's really out in terms of how that product mix is going to fare. Part and parcel because it's never been done before. It's a different format. There's not as much outdoor space in some cases. You can't enclose the parking. There's a number of factors that will go into that. So we'll see. We'll see how that sort of pans out over the next few years. Probably this time next year, you'll start to see most of them or the first batch of them rather, complete. But time will kind of tell in terms of how they fare in the market, right?
Because those don't have on-site parking requirements, correct?
They don't. I haven't seen any applications where they haven't provided on-site parking. I think to me that would just be a design suicide from a builder standpoint. But the challenge is, it's like, to me, I think they're going to go through a growing pain evolution, similar to like laneway homes over the last 20 years, right? If you look at the laneway homes now that are built on single family homes, they pale in comparison to the first generation or iteration of that building type, whether it was 15, 18 years ago when they first started in Vancouver. And so I think multiplex will go that same way, right? I think that, to me, you're going to get some of these big corner sites and you're just not going to mass them properly because of the density allowances and everything else, that at some point there's going to be amendments made to the program. It's just that there's likely going to be some people that are going to make some design mistakes, and it's just part of the evolution of that product type. Like those are the growing pains that we're going to be going through over the next probably 3 to 5 years. Right? But as they slowly start to change, as people's needs start to change, then I think you'll start to get into a cadence, you'll get into a rhythm where, there's going to be probably more efficient product in being built and designed.
Yeah, because I've talked to a lot of people in the last handful of years just listening presentations and stuff like that, specifically on the east side, and one of them in particular is standing out where she's got a house. She's got kind of an open backyard, so no garage, no laneway, but the majority of houses on her block all are lanewayed. And then to what she knows, a lot of those houses also have suites. So she has said she's actually seen fist fights for parking spots out on the main street. And I think obviously as this density, that's an extreme circumstance from what I've heard, but I think as these densities grow, that will definitely be one of the key things. And maybe they do it, not making it mandatory. Even the majority of them have put them in so far they don't have to. And I think as assumably prices continue to rise and they're looking for ways to make them cheaper, they won't include. And that will just add to, I guess, the density problems that we're going to start to see with that sort of thing taking place. There's just not enough space, and no one's just going to drop a car. I mean, as many bike lanes and stuff like that as they put in, I don't think we're going to see that mass adoption in the short term.
Let's just be clear. Planners and cities don't really care about people who drive cars. They don't.
They've just taken
It's not a priority. No. And I mean, look at all the rental rezoning approvals that have gone through. Take in point Kitsilano, for example, where you're seeing blocks and blocks and blocks up to Vine Street right now, or where you have 20-story high-rises, and you might have maybe one level of underground parking.
Really?
Yeah. So if you think that it's just isolated to one pocket of the city, just wait.
So they've just generally stated that's a thing of the past and we're moving forward this way, period.
Depending on where you are in the Lower Mainland, the cost of an underground parking stall, just the developer's cost to excavate it, to engineer it and build it, you're talking a minimum of $40,000. You go downtown, that price could easily double. It might even be, the deeper you dig, you could be well into 6 figures for a parking stall. So think about the developers going, we want to build rental housing, but we can't build it under this current framework. So the province city says, okay, fine, we'll give you a relaxation on parking. If it means that you can build us rental units, we will give you a relaxation on parking. And so now that has become this reoccurring theme now. Right? And so if you can save margin on having to build parking, it means that it just makes the financial viability of that product that much more achievable.
So it's a density and build cost thing. It's not a green thing.
They can frame it how they want.
I understand.
It's a numbers thing at the end.
Like most things. Okay. Let's spitball some stuff here. So as a pre-sale, I guess, do you even consider yourself a pre-sale marketing firm anymore? Or you're a bit wider spread than that, obviously, generally speaking, with the, we'll call it tentacles you guys have out into all aspects of the market. What exactly do you do beyond just they're the guys with the salesmen and the showrooms on stuff? So you guys obviously are, I'll let you speak, but you're in charge from like floor plan development and ideas to market trends and dealing with the city, or like where do you start and stuff?
Right. Okay, so high level, we get a call generally either before the developer has purchased the land or shortly after they've acquired it. And we'll have a very high level discussion about what the market's doing, what the product type should be, and generally kind of what is the overall vision, right? So
Of the developer.
Of the developer. So developer is considering or has purchased a piece of land. They have some ideas. They want to kind of reconcile that against companies like ours. What are you seeing? What's a product type that's really not in the market right now, that has potential, that has an opportunity, something that we can start to help them write a story about, tell a story about a particular program. And then at that point, we will then onboard with the architect, we will onboard with the interior designer, and we will onboard with a graphic design team.
Are those typically yours or theirs, or are you guys interviewing these groups together?
It's a combination of both.
Just
right?
whatever.
We have everyone generally has a connection to a particular group. And so at the end of the day, the developer always makes the call. But working with graphic design teams I get a lot of inspiration and satisfaction out of it because we're creating a brand. We're creating an image and we're telling the very beginnings of what the story is going to be.
For the building.
For the building.
So you're storytelling from the start.
We're storytelling from the start, but it's really hard to tell a story without an identity. So in a case where we're onboarding with a client and we're dealing with the designer and we're dealing with interior and graphic design and whatnot, it really all starts with naming the project.
Really?
Yeah. Because much like our children, they don't really have an identity or sort of a place until you've actually named them, right?
I never thought about that.
Development projects are very much the same way. So once we've come up with a name, it's actually quite remarkable because once we've come up with the actual name for the project, and we try not to recycle names, so we're very cognizant and aware of what other projects are named. Mm-hmm. And there's a different kind of fluidity and variation of how you get there. But once that happens, everything kind of snaps in line. It's one of these things, I can't really explain it. You have to sort of experience it. But once something gets named, that's it. It now starts to take on its own image. So then you start thinking about the types of homeowners. And ideally, we don't get involved in a project unless I can identify at least 3 to 5 different buyer segments.
That could be applicable to it, as in 1 bed, 2 bed, 3 bed, or townhouse, penthouse, like
doesn't matter.
Everything.
Doesn't matter. We're looking at a big site on the island right now. It would be probably a 10-year program, not that we may be around from start to finish, but the idea is I've got 6 different buyer segments earmarked for that type of product.
Is that something you say, if I can't honestly think of this, then we need to like rejig something?
Right. And so respectfully, we've been asked to go into meetings with projects that have either been designed, they've been named, designed, and they just need someone to sell it, or they are pretty much rezoned and approved on a certain type of design. And if we look at the product mix and we don't think that this is going to work, A, based on the vision, B, based on who they're trying to sell it to, and C, based on what they're trying to achieve from a revenue standpoint, respectfully, we can't do that, right? And so over the last number of years, 21 years in the business for me, you've been in the business almost as long, we have an idea of what works. And we can't really vary too much off of that. But I sort of have a philosophy at Platinum where I feel confident in our ability to come up with the right program, with the right product mix, and we can put the rest together. I can fall on the sword if I've designed something wrong or if I've given input that isn't correct or jives with the market. What I can't do from a professional standpoint is fall on someone else's sword because that's someone else's vision, right? Mm-hmm. And so the reality is, we can't work with everyone. We don't want to work with everyone, much like not everyone wants to work with us, right? So it's about finding that sort of partnership where you can be brutally honest with the people you're working with, because the decisions we make in a boardroom, have major financial impacts on the project going forward. Like some of the design decisions we make will make or break whether or not people like it or not. And once you get down a pathway, as you know, you get to a point where you can't move walls anymore. You can't change the size of the floor plate anymore. You can't make those minor or major adjustments. It's too late.
You got to stick with it.
Right? And so the only way to fix that is to cut price. Well, we're in a market right now where the margins, Jay, are so razor thin. They're thinner than the paper that you printed these questions on. And so the reality is we have to make sure that it caters to a wider audience, because we can't just pile all of their developer eggs into one basket. We have to be able to hedge that over market cycles, over different market periods, right? I mean, if you look in the last 18 months, look what we've had to deal with, right? To me, this has sort of been a market of it's not this, it's that. Okay, so before Trump got back into office, it was all about interest rates. That's all people could talk about, how high the interest rates are. When are they coming down? Right? Well, the Bank of Canada is looking at economic numbers. Job numbers still look okay. They're trying to get a control of inflation, so we're going to keep the prime lending rate, relatively high. Okay, so all of a sudden Trump wins in the tail end of 2004. Now all of a sudden rates have come down a little bit. No one's talking about rates anymore now. Now everyone's talking about tariffs, and that kind of flares up. Right? Well, then all of a sudden Canada gets left off the exemption list. No one's talking about inflation or tariffs anymore. Now people are talking about affordability. Like, we're kind of back to this sort of, it's a mixing bowl of all these different factors. And so as professionals, like, we have this obligation to go and try and cut through all this white noise, right? But at the end of the day, people need to sell, people need to buy, and we just kind of have to, find that pathway and be able to bridge them through.
Talking about what coming in after and if it works or doesn't, with our side on the more resale side, when we go into an expired or terminated listing, usually we've got a bit more leverage because they've already experienced the negative, they've already kind of been beaten down by the market for whatever reason why they haven't sold. So right. For us, it's usually sellers are not more malleable, but they're more, I'd say, receptive and less firm on their ideas because they've already experienced the realities. It sounds like that's not the same for you guys. It's not as kind of optimistic to go forth to a developer who's gotten rid of a sales team, obviously because it hasn't sold, because that makes that's a harder, very realistically a harder job to get into, and not worth just taking for the most part.
The mechanics of it are probably the same between pre-sale and resale. And what I mean by that is the reasons why you've been invited into a meeting for an expired listing or terminated listing, whatever the case is, it's no different than us on the development side. I think that it's a really important kind of journey to sort of figure out how have we gotten here, because in most cases, it's not like we're going to do things there's not a significant difference in terms of the services we provide, right? It's maybe how we provide them is a little bit different, but that doesn't have a major impact. Case in point, like when you go back to development, let's say in the last 15 years, because the market was moving so quickly, people didn't really care about design as much. It didn't matter. If you built it, it got purchased.
Yeah, they just wanted it in.
Now, people are going like, that's a really weird hallway that the developer designed to egress and ingress from this condo. And you go, well, it's so that you've got the floor plate, you've got neighboring homes, and this is a corner home and everything else. And I go, yeah, but that hallway goes 10 feet that way, and then it goes 5 feet that way. That's already 50 square feet. And I'm already paying $1,000 a square foot. So that's a $50,000 hallway. Right?
So obviously you got more time to think.
And in most cases, that hallway costs more than $50,000.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're already in a home that is, let's say, sub 800 square feet, that 50 square feet is starting to make a big difference. That's half a bedroom.
Yeah.
Right? In some cases, that might be 2/3 of a bedroom. So, the case in point, like for us to get involved in a project, there has to be sort of the right fit. And we're never in the business to take away someone's business. There's more than enough business to go out there. But we do have to be selective on the ones that we take on, because ultimately, for us to step in and affect change, there needs to be enough substance for everybody. And at the end of the day, there needs to be a strategy to help this developer exit the project.
Ideally, while still making money, of course. Okay, leads to the next. Have you seen profiles of buyers changing in this market change in the last handful of years?
Probably saw in the last 8 years or so, we've started to see this different sophistication of buyer come into the market.
In the last 8 years. Okay.
Really starting to pay attention to what competitors are doing, really paying attention to design. Interior design is one thing. People kind of have a knack or an eye for that.
Yeah.
But really understanding the cost of capital, and if they were buying it as an investment, what that investment yields. How can they return on a cap rate basis? Does it make sense to sort of jump in there, right? But as the market over the last 10 years really started to go for a run, of course, the public outcry of affordability kind of came into effect, and of course the government steps in. And so now we're in this market where there's 17 taxes. If you combine federal and provincial taxes, there's 17 of them. And so last year, having lunch with a developer, he had lunch, so this was, bear in mind, this was before June 1st of 2024, before the Liberals, the federal Liberal Party, was to implement the capital gains inclusion tax that Chrystia Freeland stated wasn't going to have a huge impact on the majority of Canadian families, right?
Naturally.
There was the largest capital flight out of our country in over 30 years. 30 years. That money is never coming back.
Because they can no longer trust.
It's not coming back because fundamentally, housing is seen as this right in the country, in our country. And whether you believe that or not, whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant. What is, though, is the fact that housing doesn't just come out of the thin air. People don't just sprinkle dust and all of a sudden things appear. There's a cost to doing business. And if taxation is the government's only way of slowing down the housing market, all the major players, they don't want to be here anymore. All the major investors don't want to be here anymore, right? This is why we have standing inventory. So the mom and pop investors generally made up of roughly 40 to 50% of the buyers of, let's say, condo projects, right? Because they would buy as an investment, maybe they're going to buy for their kid or whatnot. Maybe that's a segue for them to help their children into the market at some point, right? But it's the flexibility to kind of go through that. And so now when we have all this taxation, right, we're not seen as an investment-friendly country. That money goes to the US, that money goes to parts of Asia, right? That money goes to parts of Europe. It's just easier to make money. There's less requirement for them to just deal with the bureaucracy, right? And so the reality is, like, this is part and parcel why we're seeing a slowdown in housing. I think it then gets sort of exacerbated by this extreme push for rental housing. And we're starting to see it now. So rental projects are struggling across the Lower Mainland to lease up. We're starting to see rents starting to soften, right? And this is why markets like Toronto have a glut of inventory, right? So it's really trying to find the balance in all of this, right? Like, your viewers are probably looking at this going like, what does this all really mean, right? I think big picture, whether buying real estate is the right decision for you or not, that's really only they can answer that question.
Yeah, of course.
Right? But it's really just sort of looking at your circumstance and saying, where do I fit in the grand scheme of things, right? Talking to people, like during COVID with this exodus of buyers moving out of high-density urban pockets, like let's say the downtown core, they're going to Squamish, they're going to Coquitlam, they're going to Burke Mountain, right? Because they could do this work from home. Well, in the last 24 months, what's happened? There's this huge call back to the office. And so now all these families and couples are now going like, you know what? I don't know if I can do that drive on Sea to Sky every day. I don't know if I want to sit on Highway 1 for an hour and a half each way, right? And so now from a community standpoint, I think we're going through this evolution now of what is this sort of post-COVID work-life balance going to look like, right? And so to your earlier question about whether the market's crashing or not, remember, like any buyer that is generally looking at something to upsize into are generally owners of real estate themselves. So they can't just go and fire sell their condo or their townhome in Squamish to try and make their way back to Vancouver or Burke Mountain likewise, because they've got to be able to bridge the gap somewhere. If they can't sell it, then we'll find ourselves in a relatively balanced market. Or we might find ourselves in a buyer's market with more inventory. But there is a floor to all the pricing, and very seldom do we see stuff go below that floor.
So you're never going to see a 50% drop.
As long as we're a desirable country to live in, right? Like, think about all the global affairs that are happening right now. all of these underground scenarios of countries going after other countries. And as parents of young children, you think about how many countries would you be comfortable and feel safe in raising your children in, while at the same time feeling like they're getting a good education and have a good segue into adulthood of becoming some sort of professional of whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And truthfully, I think Canada is probably at the top of the list, right? Amongst other countries, but there's not very many of them. And so I think as long as we sort of have that balance of a safe place to raise a family relatively, then I think we're going to be okay.
Kind of touched on it. Are you seeing developers putting stuff on hold or canceling kind of at mass right now due to slow absorption? Are they kind of sitting back and saying no? And the guys that are, because what a lot of people probably don't know is there's like, 2 to 5 years pre-hole in the ground, or even pre-selling of work before these get done. At those stages, are you seeing a lot of people pause? I mean, it'd be very expensive to do so, but has that been happening?
Definitely has been happening. Some of them are retooling. If their pockets are deep enough, they can restructure some of the debt. They will retool and convert that, what was going to be market housing, into market rental, potentially. That doesn't work for everybody. You get stuck in a scenario where you've designed something, it's been approved. Companies like ours, maybe we're unable to pre-sell it at the numbers that actually have to make it financially viable. But yet you can't go back and redesign because you've already spent your money in 2-3 years of your company's time and efforts to get to where you are. And so now what do? You can't really afford to hold it. The longer you hold it, the more your holding costs accumulate. And now when the market won't respond or can't respond to the price you need to sell it at today, you think about 2 or 3 years from now, and now maybe you're going to add another 5 or 6% of baseline cost to that structure.
Is that where you started seeing that 15% then started to?
Well, I mean, there's so much land for sale that a lot of developers are kind of at this point where they probably will go get either foreclosed on or there'll be a court-ordered sale. But also know that lenders aren't developers. They don't want to foreclose on someone if they don't have to. So there's a lot of guys, I think, out there that are probably at the doorstep or at the threshold of that happening, but the lender's like, well, I can't flood the market. I don't need more land. We actually just need more people to buy it. Now, talking to one of our developers just even last night, he goes, I've been trying to make some offers on some land. And I said to him, my comment was, I think it's a great time to buy land. He goes, it is, but he goes, you'd be surprised at some of the pushback we're getting from the lenders. So the lenders, at the end of the day, are the ones that will have final say. Mm-hmm. And if they feel like you're going through the floor, they'll say, hold on a second, we're not going there. The market's not there yet. Right? So
they're monitoring market as well to decide on lending.
Yeah. And so they go like, I know you want to give us, let me say, maybe it's a lowball offer on a piece of land somewhere. The lender steps in and says, no.
Really?
Not taking it.
Huh.
Right?
Interesting.
So, I think we have that stability, right? But what's not being built now, so what we're not pre-selling now is not being delivered in 3 to 5 years from now, right? Whether we need that inventory right now or not is irrelevant. But I think from a bigger picture, the way I see things, we'll chew through this 36-month inventory. Like, to me, that's not a huge deal, right? So we have an oversupply. Great, that's fine. We can deal with that. But when you are not building and delivering product in 3 to 5 years, and then in 3 to 5 years, you might see 10%, 15% of the current rental being built, it means that, are we going to be inventory starved by 2028 or 2029, right? So let's just look down 3 to 4 years from now. There won't be as much market housing available. We're going to have probably a lot of rental. There will be an abundance of rental in the market. So that's going to even further trim back the amount that's for sale. So what does that mean, right? If we have a couple policy changes at the federal level, never mind short-term interest rate breaks and things like that, but if they take away some of the foreign buyer ban, if they exercise some of those types of things, what does that mean for our markets in 3 to 4 years? We could be on another cycle run again.
What percentage do you track, as best you can, of buyers that are end users and investors, generally speaking?
There's no real finite science to that. They start out as investors and then they sell it or hand it off to a child or whatever. right? So anecdotally speaking, mom and pop investors, right? So parents of, let's say, our parents' generation with equity, they would generally account for like 30 to 40% out of a absorption project. If there
30
were
to 40.
30 to 40%. Then you got some form of, not, I wouldn't say sophisticated institutional investors like REITs and things like that, real estate investment trusts, but then you sort of have the next layer of guys that go out and they'll take out product, and that might account for another 20%. So in any given tower component, you're probably dealing with 50 to 60% of investor capital that is not intending to own or occupy those types of buildings.
So I guess as this big push for rental product, rental towers, all that sort of stuff has come in, that in 27, 28, 29, that segment in theory should shrink because there's going to be extreme competition for those tenants, assuming that immigration doesn't ramp right up. The other thing I see commented on commonly that I have no exposure to that you may, are REITs buying real estate in swaths or funds that guys put together, not officially a REIT, buying condos or detached houses, kind of not to accumulate and build a tower like a developer typically would, but to buy and hold as rentals. Are we seeing corporate rentals at mass in Canada like that? I see a lot of it in the States, but I haven't. There's an assumption that happens here as well, but I don't know how educated that assumption is.
I'm not an expert in that field, but guys I know who operate in that realm, they are definitely here, and they are making acquisitions. So it's still seen as a significant portion to sort of like pension fund portfolios, right? Outside capital investment and good rates of return en masse. But they are being very selective, right? They are being very selective on the assets that they are looking to acquire.
Do you have a pension fund come in and say like, hi, we want 30 units out of your 200 unit tower? Does that happen?
We haven't experienced that on our granular level, right? They won't go into a development. Let's say if it's a 200 unit tower, they're not going to go in and buy 30 units. They'll buy all 200.
Okay.
They'll go to the developer and say, why don't you get this built?
Let's pay you to build
Get it built. We will then come in and take you out, and then we will go in and stabilize that revenue stream.
I guess what indicators do you guys look for to, I guess, so you know if a project is going to, I guess, sell out, be successful, or stall, or what are the red flags that you guys look for in with regards to that, generally speaking, with is this a good plan forward or not?
Mm-hmm. I think that the indicators we look at really comes down to us reading the room, and the room being the market. The market being what does the market need? What does it want? What does something have as a unique selling proposition, perhaps, that stands above and beyond the other types of competitors? Is there a way for us to sort of build in some kind of a premium for something that we have? So the challenge we have is that you look at any pre-sale development now, you look at any of the renderings now, they're all so good compared to where they were 20 years ago when we started this. You look at the quality of the finishing materials, like everyone's elevated their game, right? I'm seeing projects in the Fraser Valley offering the same appliance package that you'd be getting in a $3 million home on the west side, right? So as that cream has started to rise to the top, renderings as an example, to me, they all kind of just look like they're coming out of the same blender, right? I could look at a kitchen rendering at a townhome project on the, let's say, somewhere in Vancouver, and compare that to a rendering that I'm looking at in Langley, the Fraser Valley, right? It all looks the same. So from our standpoint, like, how do we make things different? How do we make things different while not copying or recycling ideas that we've done on other projects, right? And so that's kind of what really gets us going in terms of, you know, what kind of change can we actually affect so that the project can be more successful, right? I think that we have to take cues from where the resale market is. So the challenge we have right now is that because of what we discussed earlier about the building code and the step code and the building costs, like pre-sales 30, 40 years ago used to be a deal because they were so much below market value. So there was room for them to have appreciation and price growth. Now buyers are like, you're trying to pre-sale for higher than what things are reselling for right now. So if I feel, as it not the marketer or the salesperson, but if I, the purchaser or investor, look at this and say, I don't see prices going anywhere for the next 4 years. I'm lucky if I get my money out of this in 4 years. Well, I'm not going to buy that right now. Right? There's going to be lower hanging fruit for me to purchase where I actually feel like there can be some price opportunity.
Put a tenant in and be returning.
But like if we were trying to sell a project, so case in point, like if we're trying to sell a project in, let's say, the Fraser Valley, and the end price point with, we need to hit $850 a foot, but the resale market is only at $600 a foot. To me, that's a red flag, because I don't see that market getting to that level in that period of time. And so if a developer says, well, I can't sell it for any cheaper than $850 a foot, that's the number. Then at that point, we have to step back and look at this and say, well, is this the right product for that market?
So the developer can't sell it for less than $850 a foot. The market today in resale is $650. If you had the narrative behind you that market is climbing, by the time this completes, $850 a foot makes sense. Would that justify the project still, or no? You're still trying to
we deal with assumptions and hunches, but at the same time, we have to have some degree of evidence that that's going to work. Because when the rates were going up and we were closing projects 3 years ago, we were in a pinch because some of the banks were trying to pull back their risk level on that file and undercutting the contract price with a lower appraised value. And so now we're dealing with equity shortfalls, right? And we're probably going to see some of those in certain parts of Vancouver over the next little while. But from the standpoint of what we have to pre-sell, if we can justify that based on anecdotal or historical resale data, then that helps everyone's cause, right?
To that one small point, are you seeing blanket appraisals being done by the banks to keep things up so they don't have to make hard decisions or anything like that?
I had a call yesterday with an appraiser, and I had a meeting with one of our mortgage guys last week. The mortgage guy has not seen a file where he's had equity shortfalls. So it's a good sign, because it means that the lenders are willing to lend on the contractual prices of what's being acquired.
Do you think that is all at arm's length?
I would say so. I would. Yep, because I think that lenders are going to be the last ones to stick their necks out there. They don't have to lend. They want to lend, but they don't have to, right? So there's no reason for them to stick their necks out on something that they don't feel that is secure or they have enough financial tie-in with.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Interest rates, to that point. If someone buys a pre-sale, I've had conversations plenty that it isn't always clear. Obviously, they put the deposit down, which buys them the right to purchase said unit 1105. Interest rates do not begin until you get the keys, just like in a resale environment. Have you found that this whole fluctuating rate environment, mainly because the rates aren't being used today, but it doesn't even matter what the rates are today, really, because they're using rates held in advance, or that will be 2 years, 3 years down the road, people are making decisions on pre-sales based on rates? Are you hearing those conversations, or not at all?
For our type of crowd, which is generally owner-occupiers, no. The short answer is no.
Because they know that.
Well, they're going to live there. Their intention is to live in the home. So they're purchasing it regardless of where their rates are at, because they're buying for the decisions that make sense for them. Right? For some of the investor inventory that we have, for sure, they're looking at rates.
Even though they're closing years ahead? Because you guys will do, actually, I don't know this. Back then, we used to hold rates. Do they still do that?
They do. It's just that rates had been so low for so long that people have sort of gotten away from it. And right now, there's still buffer built into those 3 and 5 year rate holds. So it doesn't really make a huge impact right now. And no one's looking at the market over the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, thinking that rates are going up, right? If anything else, they're either going to stay where they are, or we're going to potentially see some adjustment. And we don't see any economic indicators that would say otherwise. But I think that from a rate standpoint, it's a cost of capital standpoint. So for those investors, they are definitely looking at, if they're buying one of our finished inventoried, ready to be occupied for rental purposes, they're looking at the cost of their mortgage in relation to the actual revenue that can be generated, from that investment. And if the rates are too high, they don't work, the numbers don't work, and they don't see that potential growth, then no, they won't do the deal. It's very black and white, right? It doesn't matter if they've fallen in love with the home. It's completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right?
Developers having conversations with previous buyers at higher prices after they're lowering. I know, are they getting like new buyers to sign NDAs or any of this bullshit, or are they just fielding those when they come?
Developers are very sensitive to that.
They care.
They do. I mean, for the most part, and I can't speak for every developer, but for the guys that we deal with, there definitely is compassion, and it also stands to kind of create challenges for us because there are incentivized programs that we try to offer as the program goes along that we just can't, because they don't want to alienate that first batch of loyal purchasers that got them to this stage, right? And so we have to handle it with care. We have to be delicate about how we do it. Some cases we will offer the first batch of buyers the same type of program if we can build it.
You'll go back to them.
Yeah, if we can. But no, I mean, otherwise, the developers wouldn't last very long in this market if they were willing to just kind of
screw people over.
Well, just move through buyers in a very unloyal way, because you wouldn't get a loyal following, right? There's generally, for your viewers, there's generally two really good points of a place to jump off and acquire a presale. It's either generally at the beginning of the project when prices are usually the lowest, or at the very end where they're trying to get out and get incentivized. We're sort of in an extraordinary time right now because there is a good, healthy supply of inventory that you could be going into a project that's going to be closing within the next, let's say, 1 to 6 months, and actually negotiate a pretty good deal for yourself, right? Just because there's so few buyers out there for some of the product.
Yeah, okay.
There's just so much competition.
Are you seeing developers doing projects that will inevitably, maybe after discounting inventory and stuff like that, come out at a loss, or starting projects that they may forecast at a loss to keep the machine running? Because obviously we've seen developers start to say we're letting people go. Are they taking the hit financially to keep people, or is it just as binary as any other equation in any other business? If they come on hard times, they're just going to let them go, and it is what it is.
I mean, I can't speak for the companies that have sort of gone through some of the shrinkage. They've made decisions for certain reasons. I don't see why a development company would take a loss on something. They, for some of the development groups that are self-performing on the construction side, whether they take a loss on the sales or not is one thing. That's their decision. They probably would start projects in an effort to just keep it moving forward. So even at some point, if they feel like the market will improve and everything else, they will go forward and do that. We've seen that with some of the bigger developers here. So even though they haven't hit their pre-sale requirement per se, right? They've either written a check or whatever, but they've started their construction program because they know that if they wait, things don't necessarily improve in the short term. They're still going to be behind. So they're better off just to build it, and they've got the financial capability just to hold it.
Yeah.
Right?
Fair enough.
And they'll weather the storm.
I'm assuming developers are constantly challenging municipalities to get DCCs and all the fees cut down, which ties into, there's a lot of pressure from municipalities to get developers to build social housing components. Are we seeing any relaxation of any of that? We'll call them all taxes. Any of that at all? Or is the city constantly and always standing strong, saying we need our money and that's it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say that's the case even from a general perspective. I think that just to set the record straight, like the municipal fees are set by the municipalities, yes, but then the like development cost levies and other things with sewer and offsites, that's all handled through Metro Vancouver. So that's an entirely different conversation, and they set the rates. Again, it really comes down to the financial economics of being able to make these projects, social housing, rental housing, market rental, variations thereof or in between. You know, it's always going to be a struggle to find a pathway to make these projects financially viable. I think that they all recognize that these types and forms of housing have to be built. There was just an article in the Sun this morning about whether the scale and density of these projects is appropriate for some of these neighborhoods. So again, right, like sort of a growing pains scenario. And whether you sprinkle in a bit of density, then you've got the naysayers going, well, you're not doing enough. And then you swing the needle the other way and you go high rise and they go, well, that's too much density. So I think to me, it's more about finding the kind of the Goldilocks. You know, if it's not too hot, not too cold, but something that's kind of in the middle. And what that building form looks like, you know, I think it's going to just depend on the developer, and it's going to depend on who's going to be living there and everything else. I would say though that with all this rental coming down the line, my personal feeling is that the people who can afford it don't want it. Like when it's built, they're not going to want it because it's too small and it's not suitable for families, or it's just not the right format. The people who actually want to live there can't afford it. And so what does that leave? Where does that leave us? Right? I don't think we're addressing the real problem, right? And the real problem is trying to deliver a type of product suitable for all these communities and markets where it's affordable, but yet there's room for families to grow into it. Mm-hmm. And that will be the real challenge, right?
Getting the product that people actually want and need at a price that's workable.
Yep, because to say to a family of 4, a family of 5, like you guys should just be living in a 2-bedroom condo and then don't commute to work and jump on public transit. Like it's just not realistic, right? And we're going to see that. We're seeing that right now with rental rate softening. We're seeing that right now with a foreign student ban.
Yeah.
Right? So that's another conversation for another time.
Okay.
All kind of rolls into the same pot at the end of the day.
I thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
And your expertise and all that knowledge. And good luck out there. And until next time.
Till next time.
Thank you very much.